You became easy to control the day you started begging to be understood. Notice it, really notice it, because it's happening more often than you admit. You over-explain. You answer questions no one asked. You react a half-second too fast, and that half-second tells everyone in the room exactly where the lever is. You open the wound to people who didn't come to help you heal it. They came to learn where to press. And the worst part is you call it honesty. You call it being real. You think your transparency is a virtue, when in the rooms that decide your life, it reads as an instruction manual. Machiavelli understood the brutal law underneath all of it. The law nobody wants to say out loud. People do not treat you according to your heart. They treat you according to your perceived strength. Your kindness is not weighed. Your intentions are not measured. Only your perceived position, and the moment that position looks soft, looks reachable, looks reactive, the calculation begins. Not because people are evil, because people respond to signal, and you have been broadcasting on a frequency that says, this one can be moved. But here is what Machiavelli never had the language for, and Jung did. The coldness you're so afraid of. The thing you've been told makes you heartless, distant, less human. It isn't emptiness. It's containment. A contained man feels everything and reveals nothing. He is not numb. He is not dead inside. He feels the insult, the temptation, the fear, the want, fully, sharply, more than most. And he simply does not hand the world a live feed of it. That is not the death of emotion. That is the beginning of command. The two are constantly confused, and that confusion is exactly why you've stayed reachable. And you found this for a reason. Some part of you has already felt the cost of being readable, watched someone use a reaction against you minutes after you showed it, felt the quiet humiliation of realizing you gave it away for free. That instinct that something has to change, it's correct. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to give you the exact mechanism that makes a man impossible to manipulate. And we start with the one reaction you have to kill first, because until that one dies, nothing else you build will hold. Sit with that, because Machiavelli is not being poetic. He's describing the entire battlefield of human dynamics in a single line. Almost everyone you deal with is operating on appearance. They never reach what you really are. They react to what you appear to be, which means your appearance is not vanity. It is armor, or it is an open gate. And right now, for most of you, it's a gate you leave swinging on the hinge, wondering why people keep walking in and taking what they want. Here's the mistake nearly everyone makes when they finally feel this and try to fix it. They think the answer is to feel less, to go numb, to become the stone-faced man who doesn't care about anything. And it fails every single time because suppression isn't strength. It's a pressure cooker with the lid screwed down, and everyone can feel the heat coming off it. By the end of this, you'll understand the difference between the man who feels nothing and the man who feels everything and shows nothing, and why only one of them is actually free, while the other is one bad day from exploding. This is not about becoming cold and empty. It's about becoming cold and full, contained, untouchable, not because nothing reaches you, but because nothing leaks out of you. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a "contained" in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Here is the one reaction you kill first, and it's not anger, it's not fear. It's the reflex to be understood, the compulsion to explain yourself. Watch how it operates in your own life. Someone questions a decision you made, and before they've even finished the sentence, you're already laying out your reasons, your justifications, the full case for why you're not what they're implying. Someone misreads you, and you feel a physical urgency to correct the record, to make them see the real you, the good intentions, the logic behind the move. You think you're defending yourself. You're not. You're confessing. because every explanation you volunteer is a piece of leverage you hand over. Machiavelli's principle here is ice cold and absolutely accurate. The man who explains himself has already accepted that he's on trial. The moment you justify, you've conceded that the other person has the standing to judge you, and now they hold the gavel you handed them. Watch powerful people. Watch the ones who are genuinely hard to move. They don't explain. They state, and they stop. They let the silence after the statement do the work that you try to do with paragraphs. And that silence is unbearable to the manipulator, because silence gives them nothing to grab. Understand why this reflex was installed in you, because that's the part that should sting. You were trained to over-explain by people who needed access to your reasoning. A child who explains himself is a child who can be argued out of his boundaries. A partner who explains herself is a partner who can be negotiated down from her limits. The compliance ran through your need to be understood. They made you believe that withholding your reasons was rude, cold, dishonest. So you gave a running commentary on your own inner life to everyone who asked, and every commentary was a map of exactly where to push next time. The most manipulable people on earth are not the secretive ones. They're the ones who can't stand to be misunderstood for even a moment. So ask yourself the uncomfortable questions. How many times this week did you explain a decision that required no explanation? How many times did you reveal what you wanted, what you feared, what you were thinking, to someone who had given you no reason to trust them with it? How often did you mistake the urge to be understood for the obligation to be transparent? Count it. Because the reflex to be understood is the single widest crack in your armor, and the people who control you found it years ago. Killing it doesn't make you dishonest. It makes you sealed. And a sealed man is a man no one can read their way into. Now go to the law underneath everything, the one Machiavelli built his entire understanding of power on. People treat you according to your perceived strength, not your real intentions. This is the hardest pill for an intelligent, decent person to swallow, because you've spent your whole life believing that if your heart was good and your logic was sound, the world would respond in kind. It doesn't. The world responds to signal. And your signal has been weak, not because you are weak, but because you keep broadcasting the inside of you to the outside, where it gets read as something to exploit. Here is the mechanism. Every human being you interact with is running a rapid, mostly unconscious assessment. What does this person's reaction cost me? And what can their reaction be used to get? When you react fast, when you react big, when you let every feeling cross your face in real time, you answer that question for them instantly. You show them the cost is low and the leverage is high. You become, in their internal calculation, cheap to move. And people do not respect what is cheap to move. They use it, not out of cruelty, out of the simple economics of human behavior, where the readable are managed and the contained are deferred to. This is where Jung steps in and gives Machiavelli the missing piece. Because Machiavelli tells you that perceived strength governs how you're treated, but Jung tells you why containment generates that perception. The persona, the face you show, was meant to be a deliberate instrument, a thing you control and present on purpose. But in you, the persona has been hijacked. It became a window instead of a mask, leaking your shadow, your anger, your hunger, your insecurity, out into plain view, where it should have been integrated privately and revealed only by choice. The contained man has done the inner work of owning his shadow, so it no longer leaks. And because it doesn't leak, people perceive depth they cannot measure, and depth they cannot measure reads, to the human nervous system, as strength. So understand what's actually being asked of you, not to become stronger by force, to become stronger by signal. By closing the gap between what you feel and what you broadcast. The strength was always there. You've simply been giving it away through the broadcast. The man who reveals everything has no perceived strength, because there's nothing left to wonder about, nothing held in reserve, nothing that says there is more here than you have access to. And it is precisely that reserve, that held, contained, unrevealed depth, that the entire game of respect is built on. They defer to what they cannot fully see. Now, the reframe that changes everything, because this is where almost every man trying to become cold destroys himself instead. You've been sold a lie about coldness. You've been told the cold man is the empty man, the one who's shut down, who feels nothing, who's numbed himself into a kind of living death and calls it strength. So you either reject coldness entirely because you don't want to become that, or worse, you chase it, and you spend years grinding your own feelings into dust, trying to not feel your way to power. Both paths are wrong. Both come from the same fundamental error, confusing containment with emptiness. Here is the truth. The numb man and the contained man look identical from the outside for exactly 1 second, and then life happens, and the difference becomes everything. The numb man has suppressed his emotion, which means it's still in there, pressurized, ungoverned, waiting. Push him hard enough and he erupts, because suppression has a breaking point and everyone can sense it. He's not in control of his feeling. He's sitting on it, white-knuckled, and the people around him can smell the strain. That's not power. That's a man performing calm while a storm runs his nervous system. The manipulators love him most of all because they know exactly which button detonates him. The contained man is the opposite, and the difference is total. He feels everything, fully, at full volume, more acutely than the numb man ever could, because he hasn't amputated his emotional life, he's mastered it. The insult lands, and he feels its full edge. The provocation hits and the anger rises real and hot. The fear comes and he registers every degree of it. And none of it reaches his face, his voice, his hands, his timing, not because he's crushing it down, but because he has built a space between the feeling and the expression, and he owns that space completely. That is the whole secret. That is, feel everything, show nothing. It is not the absence of fire. It is fire with a sealed chamber. This is Jungian shadow work meeting Machiavellian strategy at the exact point they were always meant to meet. Jung said the goal is not to kill your darkness, but to integrate it, to own your anger, your aggression, your capacity for ruthlessness so completely that it stops controlling you and starts answering to you. The man who suppresses his shadow is ruled by it from the basement. The man who integrates it can summon it or sheath it at will. So the coldness you've been afraid of is not you becoming less of a man. It's you becoming the first thing you've ever been that the world can't pry open. A man whose full emotional power runs hot on the inside and stays absolutely still on the surface. Not empty, contained, and containment is the only form of cold that doesn't cost you your soul to maintain. So let's get precise about the actual mechanism of how you lose, because once you see it operating, you can't stop seeing it. Every uncontrolled reaction is a tax. You pay it and someone else collects it. Here's how the transaction works in real time. Something provokes you. A comment, a slight, a test. There's a gap, usually under a second, between the stimulus and your response. In that gap, one of two things happens. Either the reaction fires automatically and crosses your face before you've decided anything and you've just paid the tax. Or you occupy that gap, you own it, you choose your response from inside it, and you've kept your money. The entire difference between the manipulated and the impossible to manipulate lives inside that 1 second gap. The manipulator's whole craft is built on collecting your reaction tax. That's all manipulation is, mechanically, engineering a stimulus designed to make you react automatically, so your reaction does their work for them. They bait the anger so you'll act rashly and hand them the moral high ground. They probe the insecurity so you'll over-explain and reveal your position. They create the urgency so you'll respond before you've thought. Every one of these moves is targeting the gap, trying to make you spend it automatically instead of owning it deliberately. And against the readable man, it works every time, because he doesn't even know the gap exists. He thinks his reaction is just who he is. Here's the strategic reversal, and it's the heart of becoming untouchable. The instant you take ownership of that gap, the manipulator's entire toolkit stops functioning. They throw the bait, and instead of the automatic bite, there's a pause. A flat, unreadable pause that they did not account for. Now they're the one off balance, because their move assumed a reaction that didn't come. They press harder, and still, nothing they can use. And something shifts in the dynamic that they can feel but can't name. They've lost the initiative. They came to move you and discovered there's no handle. The man who owns the gap doesn't win the exchange by fighting harder. He wins it by refusing to pay. And a manipulator who collects nothing has nothing to work with. And understand what the pause does beyond just denying them. It reverses the perceived strength. To the human nervous system, the man who can receive a provocation and not move is reading as the most dangerous man in the room. Not because he's threatening anything, but because he is demonstrating in real time a level of self-command that almost no one possesses. The fast reactor looks small. The man who pauses, considers, and responds on his own timeline looks like he operates from a depth the situation can't reach. You don't have to say a word. The pause itself is the entire statement. It says, I felt that, I am simply choosing what to do with it, and you will wait for my decision. Now we make it real, because everything I've said collapses into nothing if it stays an idea. This is the practice that installs containment, and it is not glamorous. It is daily, deliberate, and it works precisely because most men won't do it. The skill you're building has one name: occupying the gap, taking that sub-second space between stimulus and reaction and turning it from a reflex into a room you control. And like any discipline, you build it in low stakes first, so it's there when the stakes are high. Start here. For the next 2 weeks, you train the pause on small things, where nothing is on the line. Someone asks you a question, anything, even trivial, and before you answer, you take one full beat of silence, 1 second where you simply don't fill the air. It will feel unnatural, almost rude, because you've been conditioned to answer instantly, to reassure, to keep the exchange comfortable. Sit in that discomfort. That discomfort is the exact muscle you've never trained. You are teaching your nervous system that the gap is yours, that silence is not an emergency to be filled, that the world can wait 1 beat for your response. Master it on the small things, and it will hold on the large ones. Then, the harder layer, the live application under pressure. The moment you feel the heat rise, the insult, the bait, the provocation, the thing that used to fire you instantly, you do one thing before anything else. You name it internally, and you let the beat pass. That's the bait, and in that beat you feel the full force of the reaction. You do not suppress it, do not pretend it isn't there, because suppression is the numb man's failure, and you are not building numbness. You let it run hot internally while your surface stays still. Then you choose your response from the far side of the gap, on your timeline, not theirs. Feel everything, show nothing. Decide from the stillness, not from the spike, and expect the resistance because it will come and it will be specific. The first time you hold the pause instead of explaining, you'll feel a wave of something that says you're being cold, arrogant, distant, that people will think you don't care, that you're shutting them out, that this isn't who you are. Hear that voice clearly, because it's the begging reflex fighting for its life. It is the exact conditioning that kept you reachable, and it will frame your emerging self-command as a character flaw. The guilt you feel withholding a reaction is not your conscience. It's the residue of everyone who trained you to be easy to read. What you're calling cold is just the unfamiliar feeling of finally holding something back that was always yours to keep. Give it 3 weeks of real practice and watch what changes around you, because it will, and faster than you expect. The people who used to move you with a comment will find the comment doesn't land anymore. The ones who fed on your reactions will drift, confused toward easier targets. And a different kind of attention will turn toward you. The deference people reserve for the man they can't quite read. The one who feels like he's operating on a frequency they can't tune into. You'll have become what Machiavelli pointed at, and Jung made possible. A man of fully owned depth and fully sealed surface. Cold not because you're empty. Cold because you're finally too full to spill. You walked in here begging to be understood, handing out the map to your own inner life, and wondering why people kept using it against you. You're walking out with the one thing that ends it. The gap owned. The space between what you feel and what you show, finally yours. You will feel everything, more sharply than the men who went numb ever could. And you will show nothing you do not choose to show. That's not the death of who you are. It's the first time the full force of who you are has ever been under your own command. Feel everything, show nothing. That's not coldness. That's containment. And containment is what they were never able to manipulate, because there was never anything leaking out for them to grab. If this reached something real in you, drop the word contained in the comments, not to perform it, but to mark the moment you stopped leaking and started holding. Type it so it's real. And subscribe, not for motivation, because motivation burns off by morning. Subscribe, because this is the one place that doesn't tell you to feel less or care less or shut down. This is where we take Machiavellian strategy and the deepest psychology of power and turn them into operating instructions for becoming a man who simply cannot be moved against his will. The self-command, the silent power, the containment the people who controlled you were counting on you never finding. If you're done leaking your strength to people who only came to use it, this is your room now, and whatever you do, don't stop now. The on-screen video matters. More than you think. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.